Well, sorry if anybody was waiting there and got the notification and I didn't start on time. Anyway, the date is October 28th, 2025. And this is episode 3 of Final Judgement. We'll call it a book review of Final Judgement by Michael Collins Piper. And last week I read the reviews, which were kind of humorous in what he kept in, his detractors, those who gave him bad reviews, particularly ones who would be politically, let's say, opposed to the findings that he came to in this book, I suppose. So it was very fair and balanced and humorous, I think, of him to include those reviews or appraisals of his book. But one thing that I forgot to mention was that last week I could have included it, but it's probably best that I just remembered this. I just kind of maybe rediscovered it during the week, that Michael Collins Piper did try to get a copy of his book sent to JFK Jr., who, I can't remember what year it was. Maybe I'll have to look it up at some point if I can do that during the stream. But I remember that it was before September 11th, 2001. And I guess it was after I guess it was after 1994 when this book was published. I think it was January 94. It must have been that somewhere between 94 and 2001 that JFK Jr. Died in an aircraft accident. I think it was a Cessna. I can't remember the details. Maybe I should look them up. I'll do that. I'll do it actually while I play you this. I can't remember whether he crashed in Hudson Bay or whether he crashed into a building. And to me, it was a sort of when I heard then, I remember where I was driving along, I heard it on the car radio. I was actually in the UK at the time when I was in my early to mid-20s. And if I remember rightly, was I mid-20s, something like that, or approaching mid-20s? And or maybe I was right. No, what was I? Okay, 75, 85 and 95. I'm doing the math here now. I was definitely in my mid-20s. So anyway, it seemed like when I first heard that, I thought, oh, this must be like what happened to JFK again, JFK Jr. This must be just a light aircraft. And I think either my imagination filled that in, or they didn't say it was a jetliner, whether it was a 737 or a 767 or a 777, whatever it was they said that it was, or a 707. I think they didn't give that detail. I think they allowed us maybe to assume that it was a light aircraft like a Cessna that had crashed into a building. But I remember thinking of JFK. So look, in other words, what I'm saying is, I think that all these incidents are connected in that sort of traumatic way, at the very least, in that they are sort of paradigm changing events that changed not just the history of our world, but they changed the way all of us perceive the world, and they set us all up for whatever is their plan that they intend to unfold afterwards. All of these events they're necessary for the rolling out of the plan that they have, the project that they have for the new American century. And these are waypoints on their sort of historical map that they draw through time for us, right? Us hapless individuals who are moved and swayed by these events. So anyway, JFK Jr. must have still been alive in 1984, and Michael Collins Piper wanted to get his book sent to him. Even if there'd never been any direct communication, he wanted to know that he had a copy put in his hands. And he felt that this sort of review or memo that he got back, even if it didn't say that it was from JFK Jr., Michael Collins Piper felt that it was from JFK Jr.
I will tell you a story that I may have told on the air. I know I have told it. I've told it many, many times to private gatherings of people. I remember speaking at the Conspiracy Con privately in California to a number of people and telling this story, and it is worth telling. back in about 1995 or 1996, after the third edition of Final Judgment came out, I sent something like 13 copies to the office of George Magazine in New York City, published by, at the time, John F. Kennedy, Jr. I sent copies to practically everybody and his brother, 13 copies to different people in the editorial staff, but I did not send one to John F. Kennedy, Jr., because I figured it would never get to him directly anyway. But I did send it to all the people around him. I typed up all those labels all by my little lonesome self. I don't have a big staff like some of the big names in the Patriot movement. I had to do all the work myself. I typed up all those labels to all those individuals and mailed those books out all by myself. No secretary to do it for me. And about 6 months later, I received in the mail at the Spotlight office in Washington a very large-sized yellow envelope, manila envelope, postmarked New York City. In the upper left-hand corner was typed a street address, which I didn't pay any attention to, and my name was typed on a small white piece of paper that was taped then to the envelope, which made it look unusual for all, in considering the fact this is this big envelope, big yellow envelope with the return address typed in the upper left-hand corner, then my name and address typed on a white sheet of paper attached to it. I opened it up, and inside was the top one-third of a piece of standard lined paper. And typed in the middle of this piece of paper, this tiny piece of paper tucked inside this large envelope, which was obviously meant to capture my attention, was a message which read essentially this: Dear Mr. Piper, I have read your book, Final Judgment. Thank you for writing that book. God bless you. I believe you are right. You are a very brave man. God bless you. Please take care of yourself. Very much appreciated that you have done this book. Oh, this was needless to say. Obviously, somebody didn't want to reveal their name, but they wanted me to pay attention to the receipt of that envelope, the way they had put it together. And then I looked at the typewritten return address on the outside of the envelope. And I said to myself, I know this address. I've only ever been in New York City a couple times in my life. I really don't know of any particular addresses there, but I looked at this address, and then I did some checking because I knew I recognized the address. And the reason why I recognized that address is because I had typed it 13 times. And that was the address of George Magazine. So whoever sent me that envelope obviously wanted me to note the address and check it out. And, of course, it was the address of George Magazine. Personally, folks, I believe that it was John F. Kennedy, Jr. who sent me that note. I think he must have been given a copy of Final Judgment by one of the 13 people that I sent the book to. And I believe it was John F. Kennedy who sent me that note. Now, of course, that doesn't prove my thesis, and it's not even, I have not even presented proof that John F. Kennedy Jr. sent me that, but in my heart and in my gut, I feel that that book, in fact, did get into the hands of John F. Kennedy Jr. And I always found it somewhat ironic and disturbing and frightening and intriguing that he, in fact, died on my birthday, July 16th. That's the day that his plane, well, let's put it this way, the day that his plane went into the ocean off the coast of Massachusetts. Proves nothing, but maybe it proves everything. I don't know.
All right, so there you are. As far as Michael Collins Piper was concerned, he thinks that was JFK Jr. I'm doing this live, and look, I'm not quite competent at it yet, and I think I had a second go at playing it there, but hopefully it came through, and I might have talked over it a bit the first time. I'm a little bit disorganised. I thought I'd be all right to just wing it, but I was trying to remember, when it was that JFK Jr. supposedly died, and I'll just look it up live here to see. Well, I say live, as to how he died. Because it must have been between 1994 and 2001. As I was saying there, I remember when I heard about planes crashing into the Twin Towers or the World Trade Center in 2001. I remember thinking that, this must be like a Cessna or a small aircraft crashing into a building, because I was thinking of, something along the lines of JFK Jr. But so, look, I won't go over it again in case you did hear me already. But 1999 is when it was, and so only 2 years before 2001. And no wonder it was still fresh in my mind. July 16th, 1999, when the Piper Saratoga JFK Jr., John F. Kennedy Jr., was piloting, crashed into the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Now, as well, and maybe if anybody else remembers, if they're around my age, as I was saying, I was mid-20s roughly in 2001, and I seem to remember that there was some other recent enough story about somebody having crashed their biplane or Cessna into a skyscraper or some building, I think also in New York or somewhere around that area. And so when I heard about, the planes crashing into 2001, or the first one crashing into building 1, I suppose, I thought, this is another one of those things where somebody unregulated, let's say, or is a bit of a maverick, or didn't get the proper ground clearance, or was an amateur flying enthusiast and didn't understand that he wasn't allowed to fly in this airspace, or he had become disorientated or lost his flight plan or whatever. And I remember Harrison Ford as well was sort of, he came out saying that he was somebody who had many hours of flight, and he was criticizing these people, these amateurs who were going beyond their skill level, this sort of stuff. So there was a lot of that stuff there, and I do think, looking back on it, that nothing is a coincidence, and that even if Harrison Ford wasn't acting or hadn't received instructions from whatever planners there are to tell him to get into the media to say this, that and the other, I do think that even above whatever planners there are, that there is some kind of entity that just is able to gather all these sort of disparate people and disparate motivations that they have, like as in different independent motivations that they have, and somehow guide them all together to make a confluence of events and get ideas into our heads, so that we then, maybe like I did, go off half-cocked, form the wrong ideas, get the wrong end of the stick, get malformed ideas based on half-heard things, I wonder, does anybody know what I'm kind of driving at here, and if they even might not only understand what I mean, but have felt the same themselves, even if it's very difficult to express, what I'm trying to say in any way that kind of sounds coherent. But I'll move on. All right, that's just the point of fact there. There was 1999, July 16th, 1999, when, as far as we know, I know a lot of people don't even believe that he died. That a lot of these people, even like, so let's say Charlie Kirk maybe didn't really die, or Elvis didn't really die. Maybe he's dead now, but maybe a lot of these people didn't die. Maybe Jimi Hendrix didn't die. Maybe Jim Morrison didn't die. Maybe a lot of these people, Janis Joplin and whoever else in the 27 Club, that they really just went off to some island in the Pacific or some large landmass we don't even know exists, or whatever. But look, I'll stop straying into that kind of territory that sounds very unhinged, but I think a lot of my audience won't find it too far-fetched. But in any case, Martha's Vineyard, 1999, JFK Jr.'s plane crash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on with things, and what I will do is just continue reading from the book by Michael Collins Piper, and it's called Final Judgment. So here's the, I suppose it's not even the first chapter, The Myth of Dallas. Maybe it's a prologue. Anyway, it's called The Myth of Dallas, New Revelations. As the second printing of the 6th edition of Final Judgment was being readied for press, a detailed 19-page anonymously written document cited with 115 footnotes relying on a wide variety of mainstream sources arrived in the mailbox of Final Judgment author Michael Collins Piper. The document was in an envelope with no return address, postmarked Dallas, Texas. Entitled The Kennedy Assassination and Israel, Some Dallas Connections. The document, apparently the work of a professional journalist, focused on the specifics of how the Israelis could have influenced the events in Dallas, filling in details never explored in previous editions of Final Judgment. The data is quite explosive, particularly when contrasted with the mythology regarding Big D, repeated ad infinitum in JFK literature. However, understanding the real Dallas, not the city of legend and of Hollywood drama, prepares one for the revelations laid forth in Final Judgment. The document buries the tired old myth that a clique of anti-Semitic white Anglo-Saxon Protestant oil plutocrats ruled Dallas. Instead, the truth is quite the opposite. Not only did Dallas have an immensely powerful Jewish community, but more importantly, the city and Texas had been a major centre of fundraising and arms smuggling on behalf of the Zionist cause, going back to the 1940s. Even Jonathan Pollard, the American spy for Israel, said he was inspired to pro-Israel activism by stories he heard while living in Texas, of gun running for the Israeli underground by Jews in Texas. In fact, the official published history of a major Zionist arms smuggling operation, the Sonneborn Institute, reports its agents smuggled aircraft parts out of Texas to Israel. This was happening when a then recently discharged Army Air Corps aircraft mechanic, Jack Ruby. Does anybody remember what his real name was? That's right, Jakub Rubenstein, was resettling in Dallas in 1947, the year prior to Israel's birth, when Sonneborn's activities were at a zenith. Ruby bragged of having run arms to Israel and, in 1963, is now known to have part of an arms smuggling operation overseen by an Israeli intelligence officer. So, the Israeli connection to Texas was a lot more intimate than many today ever realized. In 1963, JFK's primary interest in Dallas was raising money from the Dallas elite, and that meant the wealthy pro-Israel Jewish Democrats who were major financial angels for the ruling Democratic Party there. And since JFK was at that time at loggerheads with Israel over its nuclear arms program, it is critical to recognize how JFK was lured to Dallas, and who was in charge of the arrangements that actually facilitated his assassination. And while it is well known that the Dallas leg of JFK's Texas trip was sponsored by the Citizens Council, CC, there you have the 33, CC, the elite business group that ruled Dallas, the little noticed evidence shows that two of the three key figures who dominated the CC were Jewish, not WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, as the legend of Dallas would have it. Little noticed, eh? Yes, so that's it. There's a heck of a lot of noticing going on. 2025 may be the year of the noticing. These were the folks who really ran Dallas, not the conservatives affiliated with the John Birch Society, as the old myth suggests. In 1963, one of those Jewish power brokers was an outspokenly pro-Israel liquor wholesaler, Julius Schepps. Schepps. Very like Schweppes. I don't know if you have that brand in the US. They make tonics and soda water and that kind of thing in Britain anyway. Who, or at least over this side of the Atlantic, who held the... So anyway, Julius Schepps, who held the distribution rights in Dallas for the Bronfman, Bronfman, the Bronfman family's Seagram's products. And as we shall see, there is evidence that Jack Ruby was on the payroll of the Bronfman family. I'm having a bit of difficulty with Bronfman family, whose fingerprints are to be found all over the JFK assassination conspiracy. There's Katie Kane. Ah, good. Schweppes are in the USA. It's one of those corporations. Maybe it's a US corporation. Just sometimes, you know the way it is. You're never sure if it's just something that's only known on one side of the Atlantic or the other, you know. Anyway, good to have you listening, Katie Kane. So, continuing with this, the means by which the Dallas elite gained control of JFK's Dallas trip agenda is interesting, since JFK's Dallas trip was officially designated as non-political, in contrast to other Texas stops such as Houston and Austin, which were designated as political. The private entities paying for the Dallas trip gained control of the planning, taking it out of the hands of the JFK-controlled Democratic National Committee. Wow. So we can sort of actually say, oh, it wasn't the Democrats. Amazing. Or they didn't necessarily have to be fully on board. The CC, this is the Citizens Council, designated a host committee. The chairman was a Dallas Jewish leader and public relations man, Sam Bloom. BLOOM. The CC's longtime executive director and, in retrospect, one of the least known but most pivotal figures in world history. Indeed, and I wonder, did Sam Bloom have an alias that sounds, I don't know, more Yiddish or something, like Blom or Blaum? There was, continuing with this, there was an immediate confrontation between Bloom, representing the Dallas elite, and Jerry Bruno, JFK's veteran advance man. Bruno wanted the president to speak at the Women's Building, but the rulers of Dallas insisted JFK speak at the Trade Mart. Although Bruno fought long and hard, after much pressure, the Dallas elite prevailed, causing the JFK loyalist to comment that this was one of the few fights like this that I had lost. On things like this, my judgment was usually taken. This time it wasn't. By forcing JFK to speak at the Trade Mart, the Dallas elite positioned the JFK motorcade to take the now infamous dogleg turn into what was a classically sniper-friendly kill zone on Elm Street. And as I said last week, you know, I don't think that I had ever... I mean, I never paid too much attention to it anyway, to be quite honest with you. I just figured it was something that happened in history before I was born. What did I say? 12 years or so before I was born. And so I figured, listen, it was in the black and white days. Whoever killed him is probably dead now anyway, so what does it matter? But of course, I was very wrong about these things. Events never stopped happening. we just kind of dropped you and I and everybody else who, I suppose, is alive now and is already gone and is yet to be born, is going to continue to be dropped into a timeline in history. There's no beginning and end to this story, really. Well, maybe there'll be an end, but the beginning, I don't know when it started. But anyway, what I wanted to just say there is that Nightmare on Elm Street, I guess it must have been, these isn't it Freddy Krueger? Or was that a competing franchise? But whichever, anyway, those Nightmare on Elm Street movies, I never really watched too many of those either, to be honest with you. I just was aware of them. But I guess it must have been making a reference to the JFK assassination. Of course, I've always heard of Dealey Plaza and the window from the library looking out over Dealey Plaza, but I never heard of Elm Street so much. Now, maybe it was just because I wasn't listening, paying much attention. But anyway, so this dogleg turned into what was classically a sniper-friendly kill zone on Elm Street, just below the Texas School Book Depository. Yes, the School Book Depository. That was a phrase that I always heard repeated, and funnily enough, they have an acronym for it here, the TSBD. So Katie Kane there says, Bronfman and the Nexium cult. All right. Well, what do you have it spelled? I'm not sure if you've got it spelled right or not, but that does ring a bell. Is that the one that they would tattoo or brand people? Or am I thinking of something else? Nexim. And of course, as we probably, maybe we're all sort of noticing and learning a bit more about Hebrew and things like that, anything that ends in im is a sort of refers to people or entities, plural. The Nexim. So whatever nex means. And I know nexus actually is a point which everything is gathered into or flows towards, a nexus point. And I know that nexus point is a phrase that I perceive anyway has started to be used a lot more over the last 12 years. Maybe somebody made it more popular or made the phrase or the term more popular in political speech, maybe some US president. But I remember hearing it in corporations, like corporate speak as well. Oh yes, there's a nexus point here, and between this corporation and that corporation, between this synergy and our profit, and there's a nexus point here, this kind of thing, So the Nexim, those who flow together, maybe, I don't know. And BLOEM, Bloom, Bloom, however you're supposed to say it, Nightmare on Elm Street, exactly what I'm thinking of, right, Katie? So that's Freddy, yes. Cheers. My daughter loves the slasher movies. I never liked them, and I think my parents might have discouraged me from watching things that might cause you a psychological injury. So I think it was a little bit was something anyway that I might have taken advice from my parents in that regard. I didn't want to watch things that I'd often, if it was something was on TV, like sort of The Omen or that kind of thing, if it came on, and there was other, sort of frightening movies, if they came on around Halloween time, I often kind of looked away or watched through my fingers or didn't really want to watch, in case that I might have images or ideas, not just that I have nightmares about, but that I wouldn't be able to get out of my head. I was maybe a little bit worried in that regard. Like that once you see it, you can't unsee it kind of thing. And sure, a lot of it must have been to try to psychologically traumatize us or program us in certain ways. So, the spelling is a bit weird. Claire Bronfman and Seagram's Gin, yeah. I was thinking of that as well. So, yeah, a lot of these names, they all kind of ring with a certain amount of familiarity, and I'm never sure if there's a connection or if I'm just making connections that aren't quite there. I'll carry on with this anyway. Uncle Ted, oh yeah, that was Uncle Ted saying the Seagrams. Anyhow, carrying on from the Texas School Book Depository, the TSBD, acronym he has here for the kill zone on Elm Street. And it was a nightmare on Elm Street. From where it later was claimed the alleged assassin, TSBD employee, I actually didn't know he was an employee there. Okay, fair enough. I mean, I'm actually still quite ignorant about a lot of the details of this. So Texas Schoolbook Depository employee Lee Harvey Oswald fired the fatal shots, or so, the official narrative goes. The spot was also in easy range of the grassy knoll, inverted commas, right? Or in quotes, the grassy knoll. And the nearby Dal Tex building. That's hyphenated Dal Tex. I presume Dallas, Texas, but anyway. The spot was also in easy range of the grassy knoll and the nearby Dal Texas building, where assassination researchers believe snipers were located. Had JFK's advance man prevailed, as he usually did, JFK, on his way to the preferred location, would have travelled 2 blocks farther away from the TSBD, out of the kill zone, at a greater speed. Although the Secret Service objected, for security reasons, to the publication of JFK's motorcade route, Bloom, the point man for the Dallas elite, nonetheless made sure a map of the route was repeatedly published in Dallas papers. My God. Thus, later, when the patsy, he has in quote marks here, quotations, was in custody, thus later, when the patsy was in custody, there was a plausible explanation as to how he knew JFK would pass by his workplace. I'm gonna say, yes, I think it's diffusion of I suppose suspicion and culpability and responsibility, that you can say, oh, it was published far and wide. It wasn't just me that knew where the motorcade would be. It wasn't just me that had advance notice. Everybody did. So can't point the finger at me. You have to suspect everybody. Very clever, isn't it? So Katie Kane there says he had just gotten the job. Right, okay. Trying to find out the shooter on JFK is like asking, how did they burn my house down instead of who burnt it down, says Uncle Ted. Yeah, exactly. And I think last week it was in I suppose the opening pages of this book that Michael Collins Piper, I think it was saying that we should focus more on the who did it rather than how it was done. And that in general, that's the effectiveness of a lot of these psychological operations. That they lay down, or these events, these paradigm changing events, that they lay down so many leads, so many sort of breadcrumb trails. I'm thinking now of that fella, Quantum of Conscience. He talks about this a lot, Matt from Quantum of Conscience. Is that what it's called? Or Quantum of Conscious. That he talks about how they set all these different mysteries, all these rabbit holes that lead nowhere really, so that it'll waste all of our time. Now, he goes on to say that we should just not bother looking into anything after a while, just know that it's all just a crock and just look after our souls or whatever, which, I mean, I don't totally disagree with, but I do think that whether there's an afterlife or not, and that even if there is an afterlife, that if there's a God or our Father in heaven or whatever, that he didn't just create us to be dumb, passive observers in this life or in this world, that it's on us to do something, not just be passive observers, but active participants, and do whatever we can to play our part. If we sincerely believe that there's an evil in this world, that we should do whatever we can, even in our small way, whatever we can, even if it just means speaking, and be unafraid to be called a racist or an anti-dentite or whatever, to stand up and be counted at the very least, to have the courage of your convictions, that kind of a thing. Not just say, oh well, we'll just sit around here till somebody like Jesus comes down and saves us again from these bad people. You know what I mean? Well, it's a bit of a tangent, don't mean to be deviating too much, but that's kind of speaks to my motivations in this as well. So where am I going with all that? There's a tendency to easily get off piste and out over my skis and way off piste. But yeah, as far as all these rabbit holes that lead nowhere, we should remind ourselves not to get too caught up in trying to prove how it was done and how all the exact details are this way or that way, and even prove negatives and all. It's get a general sense of it. Yeah, look into things, not to the detriment of where we're always saying, oh, just one last angle I want to look at, or one last mystery I want to look at. I think once you have on the balance of probabilities the answer as to who was doing it, I mean, then you can really connect the common thread, and you notice the pattern. You kind of go, oh yeah, everything always seems to point to these guys or these kind of people, you know. By the way, I suppose I should say at this point that I normally, I try to have at least a backup stream on Odyssey, but for whatever reason, you know, things are temperamental. It failed to simulcast Odyssey, so I'm only broadcasting, I say, but you know what I mean, streaming to YouTube at this point. And I don't know whether it's a policy change or whether it's because I've got my card marked, but after it live streams, it never even starts processing the live stream until 24 hours later. And it says so. It says processing with the stream will start in 24 hours, which means that I can't download the stream then for 24 hours at least. And, you know, so there's that little bit of, if they don't like what I've been saying here, they might pull it, you know what I mean? But we'll see how we go. And I'm making a local recording at the very least anyway of the audio. So there's that, you know. At least I hope that I am. Yeah, I think I am. Okay. Just checking here, you know. But not that you need to know. Katie Kane says, can we just agree that we're all being lied to? Absolutely, yeah. Logan Garville there says, hello to you. Cheers to you, Logan Garville. And Uncle Ted says it's called muddying the water. Absolutely, yes. Chaff and redirect, smoke screens, poisoning the well of information, muddying the water, totally. Katie Ken says, hit the thumbs up, y'all. Absolutely. Well, yeah. I mean, thank you. Do that if you think that you appreciate what you're listening to, you know. So I'll get on with this here anyway. Where was I? I'll just repeat this part here. Although the Secret Service objected for security reasons to the publication of JFK's motorcade route, Bloom, the point man for the Dallas elite, nonetheless made sure a map of the route was repeatedly published in the Dallas papers. Thus, later, when the patsy was in custody, there was a plausible explanation as to how he knew JFK would pass by his workplace, and not that he was in fact a CIA or Mossad asset. And that's how it'd been told. He can then claim, I saw it in the newspaper. Yeah. There's no direct connection between me and, you know, Jack Ruby and any of the other Mossad guys or CIA guys, whoever. Right, continuing on with this. That an assassin quite probably fired on JFK from the Daltex building is most relevant in the context of an Israeli connection, co-owned by David Weisblatt. That's Weisblat, a major financial backer of the Israeli lobby's anti-defamation. I can hear Mark Dice's anti-defamation league. Daltex housed on different floors a number of firms that utilised the telephone number of Morty Friedman. Again, the tuning fork, it goes off. Morty Friedman, or spelt in this case Freedman. An attorney, garment manufacturer. By the way, I mean, we all know that they're in banking and movie making and that sort of thing. But also, a lot of them are in the rag trade, as they often call it, the clothing business. Because I suppose it's a business that people will always need from cradle to grave. And it doesn't matter how technology moves on or how sophisticated people are, they're probably always going to need clothing. So, garment manufacturer. And, an activist in Jewish affairs. Since JFK was working to stop Israel's nuclear arms program, which received smuggled uranium from US sources. And again, was that... again, I was born after this trial. Was it the Rosens or Rosenbaums or something like that? Their story was that they were conscientious objectors to nuclear the creation of nuclear weapons, even though, of course, it was mostly their same tribe in the Alamo, or no, not the Alamo, Los Alamos in New Mexico. Even though I still think that, I have great admiration for Richard Feynman. He was one of them. But he might have been one of the good guys. I don't know. But there's so many others there. Oppenheimer was one, of course. And so many others there who were, I think even Enrico Fermi might not have been fully Italian, So most of those guys, but in any case, was it Rosens or something like that, who decided they were going to steal these secrets. What exactly? I mean, maybe they were given the secrets, and that was the cover story as well, to pass out then to Russia, Israel, whoever else, to even the playing field. I think that was their excuse or defense. But yeah, look, I'm sure there's a bit more details on that. Hopefully I've got the broad outline there roughly clear. Something I must look into properly again. Anyway, yeah, so JFK was working to stop Israel's nuclear arms program, which received smuggled uranium from US sources. It is notable that one Daltex firm linked to Friedman was the Dallas Uranium and Oil Company. The Dallas Uranium and Oil Company. It is also intriguing that one of Friedman's Daltex business partners was Abe Zapruder of the famous Zapruder film, or notorious Zapruder film. The Jewish dress manufacturer who filmed the assassination and profited immensely. And he'd only recently, hadn't he, bought a latest technology for the time, cine camera or that kind of thing, the equivalent of a home video camera, which, by the way, is on YouTube, and there's also a stabilized, and I think it's not AI, but maybe it's an AI enhanced version, I don't know. But there was a version that was it Bill Cooper sent a version to some Japanese people in the 90s to see if they could enhance it as well. Maybe that's the one that's on YouTube now as well. It's stabilized and enhanced, and it's pretty clear. Anyway, Abe Zapruder, the Jewish dress manufacturer who filmed the assassination and profited immensely. Today, there are some who now believe Zapruder had advanced knowledge of the assassination. So just like the dancing you-know-whos, they were just there to document the event, guys. That's all. Which always begs the question, how did you know there was going to be an event worthy of documentation? Anyway. Yeah, did I say that, Katie Ken? Yes, I agree. We've all been lied to. Gives them the chance to disappear. Sorry if I missed the context for what you were saying there at the time. She says, Katie Kane says, sorry, I'm mod for TLAV, and it's a habit. What's TLAV? Do I know that acronym? I must. Do I? Am I just thinking it sounds familiar? Jack Rubenstein anyway says yes, and in fact Jakub, I've seen it, and that makes more sense, doesn't it? I've seen it spelled as Yakub or maybe Yakuv, Yakubh, something like Jakub Rubenstein. Uncle Ted says all you need to know is who produced the JFK film and why wasn't a blank county mentioned once. A blank county. Well, yeah, as I said last week there, Uncle Ted, Oliver Stone, when I saw him interviewed on Rogan, on Joe Rogan, he talked about, the great harm, the psychological harm that Vietnam did to the American psyche and to so many American people and everything like that. The collective American psyche and by extension, the world. And, he seems like a very decent, empathetic human being. But yes, Oliver Stone is, I don't know if there's a different way of, whatever his birth name is, different way of saying Oliver, but Stone is Stein, and it's not German. It's, Yiddish or whatever, So you just can't ever fully trust them, unfortunately. And he's going to be biased, whether he understands that he is or not. And he's not going to play up the Mossad angle, no doubt. Although the intro, of course, the intro to JFK movie by Oliver Stone does have the Zapruder film, doesn't it? Maybe even the enhanced version, does it? Oh, I can't remember. It's a long time. And I probably saw it on VHS, maybe not in a complete sitting either, when it came out in a friend's house. But anyway, I'll read on. Or Katie, I'll just say, read out another comment here. Country, yes. Not county, country, yes. So we're on the same page there. Katie Kane says, The Last American Vagabond. Ah, okay, so you're a moderator on The Last American Vagabond. I do know the name. He's probably mostly on Rumble now, isn't he? And maybe that's why I haven't seen him for quite a while. I might be confusing him, or maybe he goes by another name, but he's an anti-vaxxer, isn't he? I think. Maybe I'm confusing him with somebody else. Maybe I'm confusing him with Del Bigtree. I think in my memory, I must have the two in my same compartment in memory somehow, or filed away in the same general area of my mind. Anyway, The Last American Vagabond. All right, well, look, that sounds like it's an impressive job kind of thing to be a moderator on his channel. Arnon Mitchen. Is that Oliver Stone's real name? Anyway, look, I'll park it there for the moment. Livy Stone. Oh, yeah, very good, Alan Hargreaves. The voice of reason, Alan Hargreaves. I always loved that. And I think it is a sobriquet, like a little nickname that goes under your name, that describes what you are. Alan Hargreaves, I always kind of chuckle a little bit, The voice of reason. Anyway, I will continue with this here. So today there are some who now believe Zapruder had advanced knowledge of the assassination. No way. How could such a thing be possible? How could people collude, and how could people have advance notice of these things that just happen by random chance? When crazy lone wolves just decide they don't like a president for some reason, or don't like a political pundit because of their furry boyfriend, or whatever, Thanks, Katie Kane, there for the clarification. So I'm going to take it that The Last American Vagabond is Ryan Christian. He's a tell you the facts, link the research, and let you decide guy. Okay, good. Sounds like somebody who is objective, and genuinely trying not to be partisan or has good scruples to say, I'm not going to tell you what to think, or at least try not to tell you what to think, or try not to impose their perspective on people, because they might have enough honesty to say, maybe I'm not right, not to be so self-assured in their own conclusions. So yeah, sounds like a good attitude. Continuing with this anyway, once the accused assassin was in custody, it was, you guessed it, Sam Bloom, who had earlier maneuvered JFK into the kill zone, who pressured Elgin Krull, or Krull, Crull, and first name Elgin, or Elgin maybe, Elgin, the city manager, to in turn pressure Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry. It's an unusual name as well, isn't it? Curry, Curry, into making Oswald accessible to the press and to move him publicly. Yeah. That never should have been allowed. Again, if they didn't want to have as many people around him as possible, and confusion and crowds to act as cover. Anyway, and to move him publicly from the Dallas police station to the city jail. Thus, the situation, and cause commotion and calamity and that kind of human smokescreen, I suppose, as well. And move him publicly from the Dallas police station to the city jail. Thus, the situation was in place for Jack Ruby to move in for the kill. There are several sources, including Dallas FBI agent James Hosty, or Hosty, Hosty, who stated, Bloom and his backers were the forces behind this. When the police searched Rupi's home, they found a slip of paper with Bloom's name, address, and a telephone number on it. Well, that's damning, isn't it? I mean, how could you not come to obvious conclusions after that? Wow. So Kate again there says, yeah, about the Ryan Christian, the last American vagabond, that he's non-partisan. Very good. Alan Hargrew says, Menachem, is it? Menahem Golan. Menahem, Menahem or Menahem Golan. It's his legit name, pronounced Christian. Oh. Okay, very interesting. All right. Now, so just last couple of paragraphs here of this section. The section called The Myth of Dallas, New Revelations. And I tell you what, like, it's powerful, isn't it? And I'm impressed that we're still going on YouTube. Anyway, I won't ask questions too much. I'll just get on with it. So it is that the Dallas myth comes to an end. This will be painful for those who thought the city an anti-Jewish stronghold ripe for you-know-whatsy revolution. Yeah, again, still, I think that particular word, the you-know-whatsy, I think that probably just is something that you just can't say. You should try not to say if you can really help it on YouTube. But anyway, instead, Dallas was actually an outpost for the advancement of the interests of Israel. And today it very much remains so. Although, Walt, and I'm just thinking, like, who is it in Texas there? Is it Ted Cruz in Dallas? Is he the governor of Dallas? Or something like that? Or sorry, of Texas? Is it Ted Cruz or Ted Cruisenstein? I mean, if he's not, he's totally beholden by them. Anyhow, Dallas actually is an outpost for the advancement of the interests of Israel, and today it very much remains so. Although Walt Brown suggested in Treachery in Dallas is the title, that the city's elite were prime movers behind the events of November 2nd, 1963, he rushed to write elsewhere that the JFK assassination wasn't done by Mossad, as some would have us believe, right? In the same way, maybe as they say, oh no, like Mossad had nothing to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination, and that mere minutes, or maybe even seconds after the assassination, Benjamin Netanyahu felt it necessary to post a tweet saying, we had nothing to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination. Words to that effect, anyway. Highly suspicious, isn't it? Anyway, referring to Final Judgment, he said, JFK assassination wasn't done by Mossad, as some would have us believe. Pooh pooh. Like these Michael Collins Piper people, conspiracy theorists, anti-dentites, no doubt. However, in the light of the big picture of Big D, details Brown ignored or suppressed, in terms of their ultimate and critical context, it's time for real JFK assassination truth seekers to take a new look at Final Judgment. So, what's it here? Alan Hargrew says, if you're in the movie business, you're in the club. Yeah, I would say so. Katie Kane says, rogue waves as in naughty seas. Exactly, that's the one. Yes, the naughty seas. The nautical seas, exactly. He's a Congress member. Oh, so yeah, Ted Cruz is a senator. Senator Cruz, isn't he? Yeah. From Texas. Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, not a senator, just a member of Congress. Okay, fair enough. Well, whatever. I was trying to remember. Is he somebody from Texas? Whether it's Dallas or Austin, it doesn't matter. But it just sort of goes to speak to the fact that it's not a stronghold for naughty C's, but for these Mossad type people. Uncle Ted says Raytheon is in Dallas. Raytheon makes the Iron Dome, right? Funnily enough, I think I just assumed that Raytheon were. Maybe I was confusing with Boeing. Was I in Washington State? Anyhow, is there some other manufacturer of weapons up in Washington State as well? Or maybe I'm thinking of Skunk Works or something like that. Are they in Washington State? Not that it matters. Your point is well made, and I take it absolutely. Raytheon. Katie Kane says previous presidential candidate. Yeah, maybe, is his career ruined now since being exposed as a total hypocrite and liar? Obviously, he should have just said, "Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I'm pro-Israel," but he can't say why because it's so obvious why. He's very clearly bribed and blackmailed up to the hilt, and he looked as shifty as Prince Andrew did, trying to deny that he knew anything about Jepstein. I don't sweat because it's impossible because I had my sweat glands removed, or I have a congenital royal feature that I've got no sweat glands, so it couldn't have been me that I was sweating. He looked as guilty as that when he was talking to Tucker Carlson. Aaron Spelling, yes. And do you remember his daughter? I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Beverly Hills 902, when I was on the TV screens, no matter what time you switch it on, it was always on. And they were trying to show us like all these girls and boys, they're all so good looking, and we should aspire to have their life in, was it Orange County? Oh no, sorry, Beverly Hills. And we all over this side of the Atlantic, if there was one postcode or zip code that we knew, it was 90210. And yeah, like, I mean, all the girls were into Jason Priestley, wasn't it? And then what was the other fella? Is he even still alive now? Maybe, I can't remember, but you know who I'm talking about. All the girls were into them. And all the girls were very good looking as well, apart from Tori Spelling, right? She had a weird looking head on her, but yes, she'd blonde hair and maybe she'd kind of blue or greenish eyes, but she was there because her father had made all these very successful TV shows, and he was a big time Hollywood producer of all these shows, so obviously she got in for that. But we were supposed to suspend disbelief and kind of go, oh yeah, no, she's really good looking as well. She definitely wasn't. I mean, she had some of the ingredients that should have made her good looking, right? Like blonde hair and blue eyes. But I think you might agree, just because you get some of the ingredients, somehow when you mix it together, it doesn't come out in the right way. Like a loaf of bread that just doesn't bake right. That's all by the by as well, and unnecessarily insulting perhaps, but no, definitely not good looking. In the same way Sarah Jessica Parker was supposed to believe that she was really good looking. No, she wasn't even a good looking horse. Anyway, I don't mean to be, doing my whole misogynistic shtick, maybe it's just an anti-dentite thing as well. Isn't Sarah Jessica Parker also one of them? Right, I'll get off that. I'll stop it now, right? Aaron Spelling Productions. Oh, he was out of Dallas, was he? Oh, fair enough. Says Alan Hargreaves. Uncle Ted says Erica Kirk's dad built the Iron Dome project at Raytheon. Wow, yeah, that I think I might have heard something to that effect, that he was involved in selling stuff like that to them. Yeah, it's just incredible, all these connections, like, and there's no way, like, these coincidences, and we'd have to kind of go like, oh no, there's nothing to see here. Like, I mean, it really is that Lethal Weapon meme, Leslie Nielsen. Nothing to see here. Move on. Please disperse. Like, it's incredible that we're supposed to. Like, I mean, what would it take to be a normie? You'd really have to break your brain. But then again, in 2020, like when Bill de Blasio was saying, "Oh, you mean I get this cheeseburger and these fries, and all I have to do is just get injected whatever mystery liquid you've got for me, and I get them yum 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 yum. Oh, I hope they don't run out before. Oh, come on now, boys and girls, if you want to get your hamburger." when I saw that, I kind of thought, they have to be trying to tell us. Like, it's like in The Simpsons where they would step on, the FBI were saying, you're in the witness protection program now, Mr. Simpson, but we'll call you Mr. Thompson. Right? So when we step on your foot, right, you're supposed to respond to Mr. Thompson. Oh, right, yeah. They were trying to make it this obvious. And I kind of thought, like, nobody in the right mind would not kind of go like, oh yeah, obviously, you're all trying to tell us not to take it. But you're trying to kind of give us a wink and a nod and a nudge and a stamp on our feet. And yet people saw this, apparently, and went, yeah, no, it seems legit, totally kosher. So it's that level of, are they actually telling us we need to suspend our disbelief, or are they telling us, yeah, listen, we can't tell you overtly, we can't write it down, don't believe us, but don't believe us. And do look into it, even though we tell you not to look into it. It's kind of crazy that way, isn't it? And yet, it still seems as if most of the normies, even though there's, gathering a lot of people on X and other social media who have noticed, there's still a lot of our people who just are insisting on, I think, trying not to see, trying not to notice, so that they can hold on to their jobs. And I suspect maybe and their normal lives, and I suspect it's because they felt like that they always realized years and years ago that whatever job they have, whatever career they have, it's an exercise in not just futility, but in a lack of contribution in any meaningful way to society, or even have any fulfillment. Their whole lives are fake, and they've bought into it. They've crossed the Rubicon on that they just cannot reverse course, and they don't want to be forced to reverse course. So it doesn't matter how obvious they make it that everything is an obvious conspiracy. They're doing their best to hang on to the fantasy, the fiction that their lives are. And I liken it to, and I'm sorry for going off on this, but I'll finish it up now. I liken it to a child who has pulled the covers up above his head, and he doesn't want to have to deal with the day or the realities of life, the unpleasant realities of life that he knows he's going to have to face. So he feels if he just pretends to be asleep that he'll be left alone, pulls the covers up above his head and goes like this, that maybe the adults will say, he's sleeping, let him sleep on, let's leave him alone, we'll go bother somebody else, we'll try and wake up somebody else. So it's that kind of thing. Of course, the other parallel is the ostriches that are sticking their heads in the sand, but I think that they can fool us by pretending that they aren't awake, whereas they really are. But they don't want to have the responsibilities that are then commensurate with or attached to waking up. They don't want the responsibility. Let somebody else deal with all this in the world. And then, once it's nearly fixed, we'll pretend to just wake up and go, oh God, was there a battle going on? Oh, let me help. Oh, you don't need my help anymore, do you not? Good, yes. I would have helped, of course. I'm very brave. If only you'd woken me up sooner, I would have helped a lot more. But I'm glad to know that I'm here, I think that's kind of the way they are. Anyway, I'll just pause there for a sec. Just catch up with the last comments here. Magic spell, says Krishnan, yeah. Have you changed your name now? No, Christian Resurrection. Jack says, cheers everyone. If you just joined us, Jack, good to see you there. I think you've missed a little bit, but not to worry. Christian says, wood equals voodoo. Okay, yes. Yeah, wood, yes. Okay. That's why the Disney fairy did a sleep spell, yes. Yeah, it's a kind of sleep. The magic wand, it had 6 points. Right, yes. Yeah, I can believe that. Katie Kane says, you can't wake up somebody who's only pretending to be asleep. Exactly, Katie Kane. That sums up what I was getting at there as well. Right, I'll carry on and read a bit more. That was the end of that little section there. Well, it was just 2 pages in this. I keep meaning to go faster through this, but look, how and ever. That was pretty good, and I'm impressed and grateful that we're still here, live on YouTube, after reading that. Will I read this? A note from the publisher, and it includes a foreword. It goes right into the foreword then. Yeah, another 2 pages here, right? I'll see if I can get through this here without too much commentary. A note from the publisher. When Final Judgment was temporarily out of print, second-hand book dealers were selling copies over the internet for as much as $185 each. And this is a book that certain people refuse to acknowledge even exists. Well, a bit of self-promotion there, but it seems valid anyway. Few people know it, but it takes as few as 40,000 copies to be sold for a book to reach the New York Times bestseller list. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a lot less than that now. What far fewer people know, but book dealers can attest to it, is that there have actually even been books listed by the Times as bestsellers, in inverted commas, or air quotes, even though the books have not yet actually been printed. Advance orders from book dealers, presumably, make this unusual phenomenon possible. Whatever the case, there is much more to the story behind the story of bestsellers than meets the eye. Yeah, we know it's just a rigged system, just like they artificially promote certain things in, X or YouTube or whatever here as well, and suppress other things as well, of course. And it's a story that most of the major names in the publishing industry probably would prefer left untold. Exactly. Artificial promotion of certain books and demotion of others. Nonetheless, a number of books dealing with the JFK assassination have reached the Times list. Was never once reviewed by the Times, which tells us that it is the source of all the news that's fit to print. They say that. Until long after the book had become an international cause célèbre. In more recent years, particularly in the wake of the release of Oliver Stone's Hollywood blockbuster JFK, several more volumes did reach the Times bestseller list. Final Judgment was not one of those volumes. This, despite the fact that nearly 8,000 copies of Final Judgment were sold within 2 weeks of the book's release in January of 1994. This, as a response to a single advertisement in a relatively small national weekly newspaper. Since then, no more than 300 copies of the book were purchased in bulk by dealers. So they were told, they got the call, don't stock this book or we'll, put you out of business. All other sales, or something to that effect, all of their sales were to individual buyers. In one instance, however, an enthusiastic reader purchased 100 additional copies after his favourable reception of the first 2 copies he ordered. Now, as a result of direct mail promotions, many thousands more copies of Final Judgment are being sold across the country, with more than 40,000 copies in circulation. When the book was temporarily out of print in the fall of 2003, there was so much demand that second-hand copies were being sold by we've read this already, but anyway, sold by used book dealers over the internet for as much, at one point, as $185 a copy. Clearly, there's obviously a little bit of interest in a book that some people don't even want to admit exists. That Final Judgment has already sold so exceedingly well is quite remarkable, considering the general lack of publicity that the book has received. One much touted JFK assassination work, The Plot to Kill the President, by former House Assassination Committee Director G. Robert Blakey, received widespread national promotion when it was released by a New York Times book publishing affiliate in 1981. Yet, Blakey's book, according to Blakey himself, sold only some 20,000 copies, far less than Final Judgment, which received no mass media promotion whatsoever. And by the way, the little asterisk here says authored by the American Free Press. So that's the publisher, anyway, of Final Judgment by Michael Collins Piper. Publisher of the softcover edition. So, if you've never read anything about the JFK assassination, Final Judgment will be the only book you ever need to read on the subject. If, on the other hand, you have read one or more earlier volumes on the subject, you'll be amazed at the explosive new revelations appearing in Final Judgment. And I have to say, just this 2-page section here called The Myth of Dallas New Revelations pretty much encapsulates it. But no doubt there's going to be more details that get to put things to a finer point as well. But already there was names and connections already there. Christian says, conspiracy of silence, yeah. Katie Kent says, I would love to link the TLAV channel, but pirate channels aren't searchable. You'd be amazed at what he manages to keep on YouTube. Often 3 hours. Occasionally they'll delete a channel. And Katie says, Alan says to Katie, they took BitChute from us Brits under the Act Bill. Yeah, I mean, I haven't bothered with BitChute in quite a while because anything that's worth watching on it is geo-blocked in all of Europe anyway. No, I know there's ways of getting around it and all that kind of stuff, but it's just, unless there's something that can't be found elsewhere, I just don't want to use it. And also, they completely they had a chance to host their servers outside of Britain and they didn't take it. And so anything you put or write or whatever on BitChute, you might as well be putting it into the hands of MI5, you know? So, yeah, and I do blame them for capitulating on it, for not being brave enough to take the necessary measures that were obvious years ago. But anyway, are obviously necessary, I meant to say. So Katie, I'd just say maybe the last American Vagabond, if you're saying he's on YouTube, but you're saying you can't link to him because pirate channels aren't linkable or aren't searchable, but maybe you can still link to it. Or maybe you just can't put a link, right, if you're not a moderator on this channel. But just maybe you could just say what the name of his channel is, or if it's TLAV or something like that, or if he's here on YouTube. Maybe I'll just have to search for him later. I mean, I certainly know the name for sure. Yeah, often our mods are prevented from posting, I see. Okay. Well, look, I might as well, Katie, I could take it away again if you don't want it to be, but I might as well see if I can make you a moderator. Ah, yes, I can add you as a moderator on this channel here. And then you'll hopefully be able to just paste a link to what you want to do on this channel if you, in this chat here, if you can or if you want to. Now, I'll just continue here reading with this. So, don't look, says this forward, for analysis of where the shots came from. And this is very much speaking to what... Was it Alan Hargreaves or was it... sorry if I've forgotten who said it. Maybe it was Uncle Ted. I presume it's after Kaczynski. So... Maybe it was Uncle Ted that said, don't bother looking for where the shots came from or how it was done or all this sort of stuff. Ask who did it. But anyway, it says, don't look for analysis of where the shots came from or how many shots were fired or how many assassins were involved. None of that appears here. Dissecting the assassination conspiracy in its entirety, Final Judgment ties together little-known details that have been ignored or misunderstood or even covered up by other authors, whether by accident or by design. Final Judgment focuses on the most important question of all: who was ultimately responsible for the assassination of John F. Kennedy? Once you've read Final Judgment, you'll never look at the JFK assassination the same way again. And you may never again trust the media. Well, we don't. I think we're well beyond that point. Never again trust the media to tell you all of the facts about any other important event that shaped the course of history. Above all, you'll understand how the JFK assassination conspiracy evolved as it did and why, at least until the advent of Final Judgment, the truth had never been told. It is important to note that since the first release of Final Judgment, only a handful of minor errors have been brought to the author's attention. The errors, and as I said last week, he's meticulous about this, very conscientious. The errors, however, had nothing whatsoever to do with the thesis of the book and were based on the research of others. Those errors have been corrected, otherwise the conclusions remain unchanged. Final Judgment stands unchallenged. The only criticism has been Ad hominem, exactly. Name calling, and we know what those names are going to be, aren't we? The same racist, antiseptic and everything else, Yet, name calling does not a successful challenge make. If anything, hysterical and malicious defamation, especially considering the sources, lends credence in its own way to the thesis of the book. And I might have gotten the phrase wrong the last time, or last week I was speaking to you about there's this phrase, I like it, for it sort of, it's got that sort of hilarity to it in the sort of, it wrong foots you and it says something in a negative way to say, it ain't true until a you-know-who comes along and denies it. Then you can be pretty sure it's confirmed true if a you-know-who denies it. Final judgment is, at least for the time being, skipped a little bit here. So there is indeed much more to be learned about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Final judgment points the direction for those who wish to pursue the matter further. Final judgment is, at the very least for the time being, precisely what its title suggests. Michael Collins Piper has done the work necessary to assemble this volume. Now it is up to the readers to make sure that the message imparted within these pages reaches the widest audience possible. When you've finished the book, pass it on to a friend. Order extra copies to donate to libraries and to give to, well, equivalent now is pass it far and wide on the internet and on as many platforms as you can. Order, even if it's just to say, it was basically the same people who did 9/11, who did the Liberty bombing, who did, who really, I suppose, are responsible for everything, every event. I'm trying to think, I'm forgetting now some other, it's embarrassing when you're live, you just forget some things that are so obvious and they just go out of your head. Like in hypnosis, when you forget your own name, when these hypnosis mesmerists tell you, the mentalists. But look, everything else, whether it's, I won't say it now that I remember something, and I won't say it because it's a bit of a hot button thing as well, but you know what I mean. Anyhow, yes, Alan says, hope it's not the Pied Piper. No, I don't think so. I think Michael Collins Piper was a good guy. I did speak to his character there in the last couple of weeks. I think he was the real deal. Katie Kane just says, look at the website. The channels change. I see. I had a good channel on BC. Oh, BitChute. This is Christian, and now I can't upload to it. Very interesting. So yeah, look, I'll just look up The Last American Vagabond and figure it out from there. I'll just give it a good old Bing search or whatever, So, Michael Collins Piper has done the work necessary to assemble this volume. It's up to the readers to make sure the message imparted within these pages reaches the widest audience possible. When you finish the book, pass it on to a friend or tweet about it or do whatever, Put it on Facebook or Instagram. Or TikTok, if you can get away with it. Order extra copies, donate to the libraries, and to give your opinion, and to give to opinion makers into your community. Yeah. Well, look, we can still do that. We can still talk to people and say, look, did you know that, there's a connection between, as I said up here, like just a fact. I think people are still receptive sometimes to little facts and I've always made the mistake of trying to draw the connections for people. But, to say to somebody like, it is intriguing that one of Friedman's Daltech's business partners was Abe Zapruder, the Jewish dress manufacturer. Did you know that Zapruder was Jewish? And that there are some who believe now today that Zapruder had advanced knowledge of the assassination. How could he have advanced knowledge of it? And I do think it is the case that he did say that he'd only just very recently bought for the time what was very expensive technology. So it wasn't just, that was great, he happened to be there. I just said, I'll go out and I'll videotape or cine reel capture the motorcade as it goes by. And it just happens to be there in time to capture the president being shot, So to say that there's a connection to Raytheon or things like that. It's I think a thing that you can just plant a seed, I suppose, in normies' heads when you're dealing with people and talk to people in the real world. So he says here, write letters to the editors of local newspapers about the book, call radio talk shows. Well, yeah, call into live streams that have big, or try to, if they're taking calls, or if they're taking live stream viewers, or if they are reading things in the chat or whatever, yeah. Some people are very clever about that. Let the American people know the truth. It's all up to you. This book, if read by enough people, could play a major part, just as did the assassination of President Kennedy in reshaping the course of world affairs. But that can only happen if enough people who will be mad as hell. That's going back to that movie called Network, isn't it? Network or Network News. Was it from the late 70s or early 80s? Who will be mad as hell when they learn the truth. Take action. Now prepare for a remarkable journey and learn at long last who really killed John F. Kennedy and why. Katie says, yeah, there's a collection of good writers there. Whitney Webb, yeah. Look, whatever she is, she's definitely a net positive and very useful. I know a lot of people say, oh, you can't trust her either. But look, she's helped move everything along very, very much. And, she lays out facts and very useful, very useful. What I didn't appreciate was her idolization of Glenn Beck, who to me seems very much controlled asset and member of, I don't know, some kind of adjacent to the Mossad type gang. But anyway, she could have been just naive in that way. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Katie Kane says, I like the drop one fact method myself. I had a tendency to overload people. I did too, and I still do. And I'm very frustrated, beyond frustrated with everybody, to be honest. But anyway, so here's, I think, one of her friends from Australia. He says, you made me think more about Harold Holt, Australian Prime Minister, yeah, that went missing in 1967. Right, okay. It's so obvious what happened to him if we think about it in hindsight, in context. So I think, was somebody mentioned him, was it you or another Australian? No, maybe it was A from Australia, I can't remember. That maybe he was already bought and paid for, but decided to cross his masters or speak out against Mossad or something like that, or against something along those lines. I mean, yeah, I suspect it, even without knowing any of the details, that seems to be the way these days, isn't it? And I do think it's what happened to Charlie Kirk. You'd already signed up, You don't get to kind of go, I'm having second thoughts now. Same, I think Tommy Robinson might meet a sticky end as well, if he ever decides to grow conscience. But he's a drug addict. He's totally addicted to cocaine and maybe other things as well. So, and they probably have dirt on him as well. So, yeah, I don't know if you guys saw the latest humiliation they did to him. Like, they got him to read, this taller Israeli guy in Israel got him to, look at this book with just the word JEW written 6 million times, but said no, not yet, and slapped his hand out of the way when he was going to pick the book up. And another guy talking about how the British people still love Israel and this kind of thing. He's a total shield for but anyway, that's by the by. Another tangent. Katie Kent says, in for a penny, in for a pound. Yeah, that's the way it is. There's no, once you signed a deal with the devil, there's no rescinding it. There's no, I want my soul back. Here, I'll give you them. Even if they would say, I'll give you my money back, it doesn't work that way. So I'm not sure what your name is now. Your brother in MC, dude. Anyway, he was disappeared. Yeah, about this. Was it a former Australian Prime Minister? Holt. Harold Holt. Some politician in Australia. Okay, I I was considering skipping over this, but no, I will read it. I had a quick scan of it a couple of weeks back, and I'll see if I can read this, and maybe it's another 2 pages, and maybe I'll leave it at that. So this is an introduction by Robert L. Brock, B-R-O-C-K, a Black American's, it says, perspective on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Not a lot of people might say, "Oh, listen, who cares?" But, or certainly, like, why should it have to be a Black American's perspective? What's the difference here? Or why does it have to be from somebody's slant or bias from that point of view? But nonetheless, I seem to remember that this was worth reading. So I'll read this out here. Yeah, exactly. Shackle says Katie. Krishnan says, look at Sheikh Wasim, is it Kempson? Kempson, with relation to Tommy. Okay, I'll see if I can look into that. And then my Australian friend says, so Harold Holt was in office while Prime Minister, and he disappeared? Literally, or he was assassinated? Or maybe he disappeared. And Krishnan says, oh, like Lord Lucan. Okay, I'll take my eye off the comments there for a moment. And by the way, I really appreciate you guys being here and commenting. So this is, as I say, introduction by Robert L. Brock, a Black American's perspective on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So it begins, as an American of African slave descent, as a US Army veteran of World War II, and as a long-time labourer within the African American community, I have a special interest in finding out precisely who killed President John F. Kennedy and why. John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert Kennedy put a great deal on the line when they stepped forward and identified themselves with the very cause of justice for blacks in America. Did they? Okay. To be sure, Jack and Bobby were the savvy politicians conscious of the growing and increasingly influential black voting bloc in America. Thus, for reasons of their own, they had made a conscious decision to align themselves politically with Americans of African slave descent. That's his description there. However, at the same time, Jack and Bobby also truly believed that it was time that the black man and black woman in America deserved an even break. Okay, again, his words. And maybe he's putting words in the Kennedys' mouths that weren't there, I don't know. Or assuming that he's inhabiting the mind space and reading into something that maybe he felt there was evidence for, but maybe there wasn't. Again, I don't know. Anyway, he continues. Through their words, and more significantly through their actions, the Kennedy brothers were bringing a previously disenfranchised people under the protection of the Kennedy dynasty. Had John Kennedy lived and been elected to a second term, the black voting bloc, as he puts it, for years to come, would have ultimately become part of a Kennedy political powerhouse. Throughout the 20th century, the black political apparatus in America was dominated by the highest levels, particularly in the all-important financial realm, by Jewish influence. Organizations such as the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, I can hear the Mark Dice music, dun 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 dun, one of the foremost elements in the powerful Israeli lobby, aggressively dictated the internal affairs and the public course and discourse of what were ostensibly black, he has in air quotes here, or inverted commas, or for the parlance of the day, and again in quotation marks here, Negro civil rights organizations, because that's what people said in the 1960s, maybe even in the 70s, maybe even in the 80s. But then they always do, they change the vernacular, and then if you're not up to date with the latest memo as to what's the latest politically correct terminology, then oh my god, you can be painted with the brush of all these hearty words, racist and so on. Anyway, these supposedly black, or in the parlance of the day, Negro civil rights organizations, However, with the advent of the Kennedy presidency, Americans of African slave descent now had an effective and eloquent spokesman in the White House itself. Did they? Well, I don't know if this is true or him just, reading or imbuing this quality on the Kennedys or on JFK that was or wasn't there, I don't know. This essentially had the effect of moving the ADL, for example, out of the loop. The ADL was no longer the quote-unquote middleman, divvying up the civil rights crumbs for blacks in America. Yeah. Yeah. The ADL and these other civil rights organizations being you could say, ostensibly white saviors, but were they white? No, they weren't. These are the great merchants, the middlemen of all people, always getting in between everything and earning profit. And not just financial capital, but political capital, human capital. John F. Kennedy, anyway, continuing with this, for all intents and purposes, had emerged as a white, again, quote-unquote, mainstream voice for black America's political empowerment. As President of the United States, speaking out on behalf of black concerns, John F. Kennedy short-circuited the long-time domination of the black community by Jewish financial interests and placed himself in the centre of the civil rights debate. The ADL and other quote-unquote civil rights organisations funded by the Jewish financial interests were pushed aside and made irrelevant. A white man of Irish Catholic descent, the grandson of a saloon keeper, I suppose that's a barman, became black America's unlikely spokesman and co-opted the Jewish overseers of the civil rights movement in America. As a consequence, I do believe, as do many other Americans of African slave descent, that this is one of the reasons that the powers that be within America's plutocratic elite determined that John F. Kennedy's presidency had to be brought to premature closure. Okay. It sounds fairly plausible, I suppose. Somebody moving in on their territory. They want to get rid of their competition. What's more, all of this came at a time, although I'll have to say, maybe I'll check the comments, I am thinking of, what was the name of the other Kennedy, who I believe tabled, was it Robert, was it not Robert Kennedy? The other Kennedy, the Senator Kennedy, why can't I think of his name, who didn't he table the not the Hart-Celler Act, the Civil Rights Act? Was it him? Or maybe maybe it was the Hart-Celler Act. Oh, I can't remember. Somebody maybe sorry. I know this, but it's gone out of my head now a little bit. Anyway, I'm just seeing there. Krishnan says Yuri Bezmenov demoralization. Yeah, and I believe we have been and are in the normalization phase since at least 2020, I suppose, maybe earlier. Right. So as a consequence, I do believe, he says, as do many other Americans of African slave descent, that, and of course, I now see that he's sort of saying every, what we now call African American, he's saying is of African slave descent, but not every black person in America now even is, because they might have just emigrated into America at any time during the 20th century or after the American Civil War. Immigrated into America. So anyway, be within America's plutocratic elite determined that John F. Kennedy's presidency had to be brought to premature closure. What's more, he goes on, all of this came at a time when independent black voices such as Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were themselves rising in popularity and influence. And I think it just is the case that both of these guys, no matter what you think of them, no matter how legitimate you think that either of them were, even relatively speaking to each other, weren't both of them essentially assassinated by, however you want to describe them, Mossad, CIA, whatever, once they started turning on their masters, were themselves rising in popularity and influence, much it seems to the dismay of the Jewish community. We now know that although we have heard much in the media about J. Edgar Hoover's war on Dr. King, it was the ADL that was providing the foot soldiers for this war, a fact that the ADL would much prefer be kept under wraps. Right, my friend from Australia, he's too kind, right? He says, you're very perceptive. One of the smartest guys I've found. No one else asks these questions or talks about it on this level. Come on, I'm sure they do. But look, I appreciate it. Alan Hargreaves says, Tom Robinson character from a famous civil rights book at the time. Okay, I'll continue on with this here. Where was I? The fact that the ADL would much prefer to be kept under wraps. A former ADL official has admitted, and as Michael Collins Piper documents in Final Judgement, it was the ADL that was actually doing much of the surveillance of Dr. King, the illicit fruits of which in turn were channeled by the ADL to J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. Christian Resurrection says, it's a bit of a coincidence that Martin Luther shared his name with another one. Yeah, I think what that is it's an example of well poisoning of information. And you see this a lot with search engine optimization on all the search engines. They don't mess up the SEO to try to bury results. I see it as the same tactic where they'll take down a whole building just to get one target in there. They'll have a collateral damage of however many tens or hundreds of people also were in that building at the time, or even thousands. They'll take down a whole flight with 200 and odd people on it, 200 souls on an air flight, and that'll act as a smokescreen. They'll say, oh, it's just a tragedy, a plane fell out of the sky. When really they were targeting the plane to get one guy or maybe a few guys. Remember, say, the people who might have been flying to, was it Kuala Lumpur or whatever it was going on the Malaysian Airlines. MH blah blah blah. You know, there was 2 Malaysian air flights that just fell out of the sky. Or Chechen rebels maybe shot a missile at one of them by accident or something like this. There's no accident, you know. There was people on it who had microchip semiconductor information, and you know, there was patents involved, even Rothschilds involved. So I see it as the same. If you hold that in mind, and then you see when they create a movie by the same name or decide to promote a guy, they say, here, listen, either look for a guy, we'll promote him from youth, or we'll give him the name when he's not famous, and then we'll make him famous. And then anytime people think of or search for or go looking in a library for Martin Luther King, we definitely don't want people, not Martin Luther King, go looking for Martin Luther, Dr. Martin Luther. That anytime people go looking for the founder of the Protestant Reformation, or religion, whatever you want to say, that will put them off the scent of accidentally finding on the you-know-who's in their lives, right? That instead we'll have the whole attention of everybody kind of going, oh, Martin Luther, oh, I've heard of that guy, he's a black guy, isn't he? Yes, Dr. Luther King, yes, Martin Luther King, yeah. And so that's a way of refocusing everything away. And you see that they do this. They create books and movies, and they create stars with those kind of stage names, just so as to bury in the search results of Google or Bing or whatever else, even Yandex or whatever else you look, to pollute the results that you get with these other people. And so I know that I've been looking for a book or a movie or whatever that I know exists, but I have to spend ages filtering out the pollution that is created by these false leads. So they'll go to all that trouble of creating these famous people or books by those titles just to poison the well of information in that way. Sorry for going off on that tangent, but I suppose in case, you know, you've been thinking along the same lines, it's important to lay it out, I suppose. So look, I really appreciate it. I'm blushing a bit here. Katie Ken says, oh, obviously it's not just about me, but she says, that's why I keep coming back. Intelligent creators and are few and much appreciated. Very nice of you there, Katie. I know you're not just speaking to me. Okay, I'll stop trying to look for compliments. Anyway, I'll continue on with this here. Dr. King, and Malcolm X, and others. And yeah, I'm well aware that he likely didn't write all his own stuff. He had hidden hands helping him, and who would plagiarize stuff for him. Anyway, Dr. King and Malcolm X and others knew the way of the black ghetto. They understood how black America was being manipulated. They knew how the drug and gambling and prostitution rackets of Meyer Lansky, a major ADL contributor, were eviscerating black America. They dared to speak out. Right, see, that's it. They started growing a conscience. They started turning on their masters, or their puppet masters. For that, both Martin and Malcolm ultimately paid the price. When all is said and done, there's no question in my mind that we will find that those who slew those dreamers were also behind the murder of John F. Kennedy and his brother Bobby. Exactly. That's the key thing there, to draw these parallels, and you see the thread that weaves itself through everything. You notice the patterns and the connections. The whodunit, not exactly as to how they did it and all the intricate details. Those are the details that keep you distracted. It's always the same whodunit. This is why I take great pleasure in penning this brief introduction to Michael Collins Piper's remarkable book. I believe that Final Judgment provides the answer to the mystery of who really killed John F. Kennedy and why. I will say this for the record. I have nothing but contempt for those cowardly white liberals who portray themselves as admirers of JFK's stand on civil rights and say that they want to find the real murderers of President Kennedy, but who otherwise ignore or suppress the facts put forth in Final Judgment. They are frauds and phonies. They are afraid of the truth. They are profiteers who are trading on the death of President Kennedy, but covering up all of the facts that are there before them. Well, absolutely. And nothing has changed about that today. You find that recently speaking, like, let's say, you have a lot of clashes more and more with, let's say, the liberal lefties who support, and they always do this, like they either support people or are against people, but for the wrong reasons. So they might support Middle Easterners or Palestinians or Arabs or Muslims or this kind of thing, but also they support LGBT and all this kind of thing. And sometimes, those two political interest groups clash. And when they do, the liberal lefties never quite know who to support, whether it's the people who would throw one off the building or not, or or I don't know, what could you say? There's even the crazies who say they're LGBTs for Muslims and Palestinians and whatever. Even though I'm very sympathetic to Palestinians myself, but I believe for the right reasons, but whatever, Point is, there is a political contradiction between what they claim to support, and they just avoid having to reconcile their contradictions. It's, again, speaks to their cognitive dissonance. These people are hypocrites. They don't really believe in anything. And the reason that there is a contradiction in their worldview is because they don't really arrive at any of their political viewpoints from first principles. They just adopt principles that sound good because they want to be the good guys. And when they hear political points of view that sound moral, they go, I'm moral, I'm good, so that must be one of my political views, or at least I'll pick it up and adopt it. And they never want to have to defend it or reconcile it against something else that they've also picked up, because they don't know how to back out of a position without losing face, and then without either having to concede that maybe they're not so good as they like to pretend that they are, or so morally pure, They don't want to have to actually do any self-examination, no audit of internal consistency when it comes to morality. They just want to assume the conclusion that they are morally superior to the rest of us, right? Without actually having to derive any of their opinions from a point of view of a moral framework. And they don't want to be found out, exposed for the hypocrites, and actually, I suppose, morally bankrupt people that they really are. So, yeah, again, sorry for going off on a tangent, but, it's one of those things that every so often when you have the opportunity in the soapbox to lay it out, you do, So Krishnan says there's one called Lyor Cohen, Lyor, okay, who owned the Rap in New York. Katie says, I must bid you all good night. I've enjoyed the show and chat. Looking forward to the next one. Okay, cheers, Katie, and thanks for joining and sticking around for as long as you did. My friend from Australia, I'm just going to call you that because your name is too long for me to see the whole thing, but it's your brother in, maybe it's your brother in My Christ or something like that, dude. Reminds me of the characters, he says, such as Morris Levi of Roulette Records, New York. Very powerful guy. And Alan Hargreaves said, they even had an Idris Elba show called that. Ah. Okay. There's something there. Yeah, okay. Right, I'll get back to this anyway. He says, I will say this for the record. I have nothing but contempt for these cowardly white liberals. So he says, there's no other book ever written that explains the JFK assassination conspiracy so honestly, or which makes everything about the JFK assassination conspiracy so crystal clear. Once you've read Final Judgment, you'll understand the big picture. Michael Collins Piper has stepped right up into the footlights of center stage and, like one of those great Broadway impresarios, Piper has presented a spellbinding scenario outlining the entirety of the JFK assassination conspiracy, more powerful and more convincing than any before. I think you'll agree. So the writer there, who I presume is this guy who's saying he's how does he describe himself? A black American descent, or he says, as an American of African slave descent. His name is Robert L. Brock, founder of the Self-Determination Committee. Now, there's 4 pages here of acknowledgements and intrigue, it's called. So that I didn't read this fully, or if I did, I don't remember whether there's enough in it. I tell you what, I will start reading it, but maybe when he goes through an exhaustive list of names, maybe I won't do that. I'll see if I'll do 1 page of this, right? Acknowledgements and intrigue, and then maybe we'll leave it at that. Having written a book on such a controversial topic as the JFK assassination, coupling that subject with a highly sensational, in quotation marks, thesis, has proven quite an adventure. It has been rewarding, if not sometimes frustrating. It's brought me, and this is the words of Michael Collins Piper here now, it's brought me a lot of new friends, and a lot of enemies too. Since the first edition was released, I've received so many letters of congratulation and appreciated comments of many people I respect, who have said, as one put it, I think you've pinned the tail on the donkey. Excuse me 1 second, I just want to take a drink of water. No, sorry for the radio silence there. Continuing with this anyway. Since the first edition was... Oh, I've read that. Pinned the tail on the donkey. Never, having styled myself as an expert, quote unquote, on the JFK assassination. I protest when anyone introduces me as such. In fact, despite what many have assumed, the subject has never been a particular preoccupation of mine. There are others who have devoted much more time to the topic, and I am very familiar with their work. However, there are many JFK assassination researchers who refuse to admit that there is even any basis for my thesis. There are those who don't wish to even acknowledge the very existence of this book. It's that controversial. In the pages that follow, I pull no punches in naming names or pointing out why I believe some researchers, quote unquote, are disingenuous and perhaps even compromised, bought off by forces responsible for the JFK assassination. I don't believe I'm overstating the case at all. Some fools have suggested Final Judgment is an Arab propaganda. Well, again, some things never change. I wonder how many of you have you heard that, everything now is a Qatari bought and paid for operation, or this guy's taking Qatar money, or Qatar money, as they somehow like to pronounce it, which is strange. It's like how a lot of people started pronouncing Kiev as Kiev. Somehow Qatar is Qatar. Anyway, Arab propaganda. They try to say, like, you know, again, always trying to set up the opposite pillars or the opposite poles so they can control the conversation. Anyway, he says, no Arab government or financial interest, or even any Arab American source, had any hand in preparing, publishing, or distributing this book. Only in later 2001, a full year after the publication of the 5th English language edition, did a privately owned Arabic language publishing house issue a translation of the book. This work is mine alone. Some critics pointed out that I was an employee of Liberty Lobby, the populist institution that published the now defunct national weekly newspaper The Spotlight. These critics note that Liberty Lobby questioned US favoritism towards Israel. All of this is true. However, for this I make no apologies, nor, for that matter, are any apologies due. In fact, as this new edition of Final Judgment is being delivered to the publisher, the global media is focused on Israel and the Middle East, and sorry, I lost my place there. Is focused on Israel and the Middle East, and the publications and voices of the Israeli lobby in America are crying, true or not, that the whole world is against us. Of course, they're always saying that. They cry out that the whole world is against us as they embroil us in more and more never-ending wars. I say us, but you know what I mean. So it was precisely my association with Liberty Lobby that enabled me to gain special insights, particularly vis-a-vis US policy toward Israel, which assisted tremendously in the preparation of this book. Other JFK researchers have not had this unusual advantage. What's more, as you will see in Final Judgment, Liberty Lobby became embroiled in a heated libel trial after ex-CIA figure E. Howard Hunt brought a lawsuit against Liberty Lobby for publishing an article alleging the CIA intended to frame Hunt for involvement in the JFK assassination. Wow. Alan Hargreaves, oh yeah, he says 5% Nation of Islam. I had forgotten about them, but yeah. My Australian friend says, even Brian Epstein, Beatles manager, yeah, his death was suspicious. Right, yeah. Definitely, yeah, he was in court not too long before that, wasn't he? On some kind of nasty thing. Yeah, so death at 67, within 12 months after Paul, right. And again, we won't get into the Paul conspiracy. Changed his look, all strange cases. Oh yeah, he looked like, well, they wanted him to look as crazy as possible. Maybe by design, to discredit what he might have been saying, if he was saying anything bad about the tribe, yeah. Krishnan says, Troy Kennedy Martin created Z cars at the time. Or is it Z cars? Krishnan says, there is an actress now called Kennedy Martin. Ah, right, again. So this is the poisoning of the information well, yeah. Okay. I'll continue with this. Acknowledgements and intrigue. Handling the Spotlight's successful defence, appropriately enough, was Mark Lane, Dean of the Warren Commission Critics. Lane put aside presumed ideological differences with Liberty Lobby and skillfully used the Hunt case to explore the JFK assassination in a legal forum, the first such opportunity since Jim Garrison's ill-fated prosecution of Clay Shaw. Thus, following the Hunt case from the inside, and later studying Lane's account of the affair in plausible denial, gave me a unique vantage point others haven't had. I thank Mark Lane and Willis Carto, the founder of Liberty Lobby, for this opportunity. Willis Carto's encouragement and enthusiasm were most important in making this book possible. The title for Final Judgment was his suggestion and right on target. Well, Willis Carto seems to have been a great help to more than one author. So he helped the publishing of, or was it the republishing of Imperium by, oh God, the name escapes me now. It'll come back to me in a moment. Yockey, Francis Parker Yockey, but he wrote under a pseudonym originally. So he was great encouragement to him as well. Or at least he made great efforts to get that book republished in the 1960s. Imperium. Wasn't it Ulich Varangi or something like that was the pen name at one point when it was first published. Anyhow, Willis Carto, that name comes up again, and the Liberty Lobby, fantastic. Anyway, carrying on here. As for Mark Lane, let it be noted that had he not written one word after Rush to Judgement, the book that proved the Warren Commission report a fraud, we would still be indebted to Mark for that alone. Although many books from others came later, Mark's singular crusade convinced the world there was much more to the story. Mark and his one-of-a-kind wife, Trish, are tremendous human beings and valued friends. In Final Judgment, you will also meet another remarkable individual, a former French intelligence officer who provided me with stunning, inside information that forced me to rewrite the first draft of Final Judgment, thereby bringing my thesis full circle. Had it not been for his input, this book would not be complete. The name of my French source, Pierre Neuville, Neuville, was unveiled for the first time in the 5th edition of Final Judgment, but the Mossad, of course, knew his identity from the beginning. Although my first draft presented, I think, a compelling indictment of Mossad complicity in the JFK assassination, my French source pointed me in a direction that convinced me and many readers that Final Judgment was on the mark. Read here. Wobbly Boost says, "Sorry I'm late. I do enjoy you reading from the feller whose head is after exploding." Yeah. Cheers, Wobbly Boost. Might be wrapping it up now fairly soon, but we'll see how we go. I've been going, I think, roughly 2 hours now at the stage. So yeah, I'll try and wrap it up. Alan Hargrave says, "It literally blew up." Yeah. Glad I'm not a Kennedy, as the song goes. Right. History owes a debt to the well-known and respected former US Congressman Paul Findlay, a liberal, no right-wing extremist, in inverted commas, air quotes, who introduced me to this French source and vouched for his credibility. Only recently did I formally identify Findlay as the conduit, but again, it was no mystery to those who make it their business to know these things. Another former US Congressman, the late John G. Schmitz, told me of his own long-time suspicion of Mossad involvement in the JFK assassination, based on his own inquiries, and encouraged me to write this book, saying it was a book he would have liked to have written. A rather colourful international businessman, intimately associated with several prominent figures mentioned in Final Judgement, gave me a rather firm endorsement of this book's thesis, saying succinctly, "I think that's pretty much what happened." Considering this gentleman's connections, his assessment is very telling indeed. Although they've certainly never endorsed my thesis, several authors upon whose works I relied extensively to confirm the secret wars between JFK and Israel and suggest, in my view, that behind-the-scenes intrigue in the US-Israeli relationship is relevant to the events of November 22nd, 1963. Stephen Green, Andrew and Leslie Coburn, that's Cockburn, and Seymour Hersh, in their own studies of US Middle East policy, Taking Sides, Dangerous Liaison, and the Samson Option, respectively. I knew the Seymour Hersh name was ringing a bell there. I have the Samson Option, but I was considering reading but before this, but I felt this was the more important one. The Samson Option, respectively, provided the foundation upon which much of my own research was conducted. In 1998, 4 years after the first release of Final Judgement, Israeli historian Avner Cohen, Avner-Cohen, author of Israel and the Bomb, came along, and his book, certainly unintentionally, has given great credence to my thesis. Christian Resurrection says, A. Kennedy Martin wrote The Italian Job. Okay. I don't think I knew that. Cohen told a mutual acquaintance, "I'm sure he'd be shocked to know we even know somebody mutually," that he was horrified to learn, while doing an internet search for data on his own book, about the existence of Final Judgement and its thesis. Of course, Cohen rushed to assert his view that rejects the idea of Israeli involvement in the JFK assassination. But the genie is out of the bottle, and the world now knows that Israel and JFK were not the special friends that some would have us believe. A little noticed but important book, There's a Fish in the Courthouse, is the title, by Gary Wean, W-E-A-N, enriched my own work considerably. Unfortunately, Gary now claims my book plagiarized his, and that I was forced to acknowledge his book, which, of course, was clearly quoted and cited and prominently acknowledged from the start. Nobody forced me into giving his book the recognition it was due. In fact, Gary's friend, Wade Frazier, Frazier, has pointed out that I'm one of the few who has even given any credence or publicity to Gary. A special thanks to a very real friend, Tom Valentine, host of the popular Radio Free America. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know that guy. I think he's famous or infamous. Yeah. Anyway, I must have heard a lot of his stuff. Anyway, when no other, just, recorded and reproduced on YouTube or wherever. When no others would, Tom gave me the opportunity to discuss this book and has continually given me much encouragement. Among other things, by the way, Tom's also a fabulous source of information on alternative health. He says, check out Carotech, CAROTEC.com. Now, whether it exists anymore, or even if it does, whether it's good, I don't know. Several other radio hosts, including Jack Stockwell and Barbara Jean at K-Talk in Salt Lake City, and One-Eyed Jack Jackson in Springfield, Illinois, Bill Boshears, that's Boshears, in Cincinnati, Ron Muhammad, that's Muhammed, in San Diego, Victor Thorne, and Lisa Vicky, Vicki, is a sort of a nickname. Lisa Vicky Giuliani of Babel Magazine, Babel magazine.com, and Rick Adams at Whale, Wale, in Providence, Rhode Island, have also dared to have me on. Christian says late 60s. Both Wobbly Boost says both the best car chase and highest scenes ever. Is that it? Oh yeah, highest scenes. Maybe looking down over the Stelvio. Is it the Stelvio Pass or some high mountain range anyway in the Swiss Alps, I suppose, or sorry, Italian Alps. Talking about the Italian job, and Christian says Rolling Stone, Brian Jones and John Baptist Kennedy, baths and heads. Maybe you're getting very esoteric there. Brian the Brain, decapitated. Yes, indeed. Always looking at all the words and thinking of all the wordplay, I suppose. All right. Continuing with this, and maybe I will complete this here, these 4 pages of acknowledgements and intrigue. Ex-CIA official Victor Marchetti's, that's Marchetti, Victor Marchetti's counsel was appreciated, although my longtime buddy makes me chuckle when he says he still believes the KGB killed JFK. Yes. As publisher of New American View, Victor and his... Because, yeah, Russia, you know. Again, some things never change. As publisher of New American View, Victor and his right hand, Donna McGrath, Grath, you might say McGrath, kept a watch on the Israeli lobby in Washington. Vince, Ryan, John Tiffany, Travis McCoy, and Jim Yarborough. Now that Yarborough name rings a bell. Among others, provided helpful suggestions during the writing of Final Judgement. Each in his own way contributed to this volume. Dr. Alfred Lilienthal, that's Lilienthal, the brash and wonderful pioneer, American critic of America's disastrous Middle East policy, was most supportive. A warm nod of appreciation to the late H. Keith Thompson, whose support for my work honoured me tremendously. From the start, Van Loman has been a valued confidant, providing sharp insights and remarkable leads that brought the book full circle. Wobbly Boost says, broke my decryption machine. Christian says, all religious ceremony and ritual upon public. Yep. Plus Abraham, everything. All right, well, listen, you're tapping away at the Enigma machine there, Christian. Continuing with this in our acknowledgements and intrigue, a tremendous, albeit belated word of thanks to Bill Grimstad. Well, this is the fella, again, who I see as part of a sort of a trio with James Shelby Downard and Michael A. Hoffman. Bill, otherwise known as William, I think. I think he's William N. Grimstad as well. William N. Grimstad. For putting me onto Frank Sturgis's little noted Mossad connection, a rather relevant point. And that's putting it lightly. That escaped my own research. Tom Kerr, that's Kerr, Bill W., Reg O, Martin Williams, Tony Blizzard, and others provided editing which improved this book considerably. Bob H.L.Diehli, that's D-I-E-H-L-I, Diehli's humour and support has also been encouraging. Friendly words from the late Ace Hayes, Acehayes, firebrand publisher of the Portland Free Press, and Daniel Brandt, Brandt, of Namebase Newsline proved the point that the JFK assassination is not a matter of right or left, in quote-unquote right or left, as some naive folks still believe. Those old labels are gone with the wind. And yeah, we're well beyond right and left here, aren't we? I think we all do know it's just part of the controlled op, wings of the same bird and all that. A two-party you-know-who party. Those old labels are gone with the wind. So again, very on the money when he was writing this, and I think this update was from early 2000s, and nothing has changed since in that regard. God bless, he says, Herbert Calhoun, the former State Department official, whose no-holds-barred endorsement of Final Judgment has absolutely floored my critics, who do know that there are a lot of others in high places who agree with Calhoun but just aren't yet ready to say it publicly. Yeah, exactly. Wobbly Boo says, same puppet show, different socks. Yeah, I think of Punch and Judy all the time. Krishnan, yeah. Counsel from British writer Gordon Thomas was very much appreciated. Thanks also to Gordon's colleagues at The European, is the name of the title, for publishing a detailed exposition of my controversial research. The hearty endorsement from no-nonsense Idaho attorney Edgar Steele, spelled with an E at the end, see conspiracypenpal.com, has certainly helped spread the word. And I would be remiss in failing to mention Sid and Wolf at, now that's, I don't know if that's a typo or not, he's got two W's, WWOOLF, but Wolf, anyway, at feralnews.com, and Russ, RUSS, at playtowinmoney.com, and again, no promotion of these, just reading it for the record, and the folks at afrocubaweb.com, who have generously promoted Final Judgment. Alan Jones' excellent synopsis of Final Judgment in How the World Really Works, abjpress.com, has really been a boost. And Carol Adler. Adler, I'm pretty sure, is eagle in German. So you just never know, is it really German though? Anyway, and Carol Adler, the courageous maverick publisher of many fascinating, controversial, in quotation marks, titles, see dandelionbooks.net, okay, maybe she's alright, also stands out for her interest in my work. To Christopher and Helye Bolyan, that's HELJEBOLLYN, you're gutsy people and good friends. The same to Professor Ray Goodwin, who put his career on the line by telling his students Final Judgment is the last word on the JFK affair. Thanks also to others who provided moral support along the way. Blaine Hutzel, I might as well read these out. Maybe some of these names are familiar now, and maybe we'll see them crop up elsewhere. Paul Wolfe, Pete Godlove, Dale Crowley, Robert Boody, BOODY, Mark Lillis, Mary and May, the travel agents, Tom McIntyre, Joe Power, Ed Harrington, George Kadar, Joe Fields, Jim Scott, Robert Wolfe, Larry Showell, R.H. Showell, Greg Garnett, Jerry Myers, Donald Mallory, David Lewis, Dan Hinton, James Jakes, Anne Cronin, Julia Foster, Tricia Katzen, Anne Brown, Helen Nunley, Marie Zittel, Aggie, Mike, Nick, Jim, Judy, Ruby, Lee, George, Will, Ricky, DVS, Steve, James the Poet, and last but far from least, that special dog Brute, and all my other four-legged friends, too numerous to mention, he says. My mother, always my worst critic, read the volume and became convinced, her initial doubts notwithstanding. Too bad my father didn't live to see the book published. He would have been proud. I can appreciate that. All of this having been said, I now leave it up to the reader to determine if I have indeed pinned the tail on the donkey. That's Michael Collins Piper. Yes, I will leave it there. I think, and I'll continue next week with an apology from the author. I missed the missing link. Right, I'll continue from that point next week. Just catch up here with our last couple of comments, and we'll say goodbye. Alan Hartgrove says, grand chessboard. Absolutely. The grand chessboard, and we're all players on it in some way or another. We're all pawns, I suppose, but we have to play our part as and when our part might become important, particularly. Once that move becomes apparent to us, we must take it. Christian says, yes, Zbigniew Brzezinski. And I know Zbigniew is not how you pronounce it. It's something like Zbigniew or something like that, or Zbigniew. Not even getting even much closer to it, but I seem to remember reading that when he was, I think, chief of staff or political advisor to more than one president, maybe Nixon, maybe Reagan. Am I getting? Maybe I'm off by a presidency, but in any case, I remember reading that there was a memo that went out telling people it's not Zbigniew, and here's how to pronounce it properly, like and you better get it right, otherwise you're a bigot and you're American centric and you're hateful to people of Eastern European or Russian ethnicity. Although I think he wasn't either of those. I think he was a member of the tribe as well. I assume he was. But you imagine, but the same political correctness then, like if you don't know how to pronounce his name wrong, or if you're pronouncing it wrong, do you remember like with what was the name of the press secretary under Biden? If we were getting her, or sorry, it wasn't the press secretary, it was the VP, the black VP. If we called her Kamala instead of Kamala, or vice versa, whichever, then we were also bigots, you know, same kind of thing. Anyway, yeah, another. Oh yeah, he wrote a book, didn't he, about the grand chessboard or something like that. So he says you pronounce it like you're working up a huge spit. Anyhow, do you think Golda Meir's was a man? Yeah, possibly. Yeah, definitely. I think yeah, possibly. Yeah. Was she the? No. Is it possible that she was the first prime minister if David Ben-Gurion was the first president, or was it vice versa? Maybe she was the first female prime minister or president. I can't remember. But she was a formidable woman. A very masculine presence. Not that I must read up properly on her, but anyway. Wobbly Boost says they trick you into playing chess by their rules if they can. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just play checkers and well, yeah. I mean, I'd like to be able to sort of say the only winning move is not to play, but not playing is not an option either, really, you know. Anyway, look, I appreciate you guys commenting and listening, and I will leave it there. And I'll do another one before too long anyway. Hopefully, if not tomorrow, within a couple of days. And we'll see where we are anyway by the next anniversary of JFK's assassination, and see if we get some more of this great book read into the record sort of thing and comment on it. Okay, thanks again for listening.